What up, friends? Welcome back to our Intro to Java web series. In today's video, we're going to be going overriding versus overloading. Now, this is kind of a light topic. It's nothing too crazy. Overriding, I'm going to go over pretty quickly, and then overloading, I'm going to write a program to show you examples of overloading. Now, what overriding is, as you can see from this picture, overriding is when you have two separate classes. Right? So you have, in this example, class dog, and you have class hound that extends dog. Now, if you remember in our last video, this is inheritance, where hound is inheriting from the dog class. But when it comes to overriding, is when you have two classes that have a method with the same name and the same parameters. So you see here, this method bark is also found in the hound class. But if you can see here that they do two separate things. So in class dog, the bark is wolf, right? But in class hound, the bark is bull. I don't know if that's a sound, but bull, right? So it's two different things. It does two different operations between the two different classes. But the thing is that they have the same method name and the same parameter. So you would think that the computer would get confused and wouldn't know which bark you're talking about. But the computer, since it's in two different classes, the computer is allowed to know, hey, we're pointing at this class right here. So this bark method is wolf. So if we were looking at a dog object, it would know that this method would do this. It would say wolf. And if it had a hound object and it called this bark method, it would do this. The bowl, or whatever that sound is, right? So something that I like to relate it to is our toString methods. So let's take a look at our last program we wrote, which is our vehicle class and our motorcycle class that extended our vehicle class. I think I brought it up in the last video, is that we have the toString method where it's the same method name and the same parameters, which in this case there are no parameters, but they do two different things. They execute two different processes. So in this one, it prints out the number of seats, the number of wheels, and the VIN number of a motorcycle. While the vehicle one only prints out the number of wheels and the vehicle VIN number. So in the last video, we actually compiled this main method and we checked the two different toStrings. Now, what I'll do is I'll do it one more time, just to show you. So I'll compile it, vehicle.java, then Java vehicle. Now you see here, this is the toString for our vehicle class, right? So we called the toString, we actually called it right here, or not right here, where we called the toString, right? So all that shows is the number of wheels and the VIN number. Now this right here is our motorcycle toString, where it says the number of seats, the number of wheels, and the VIN number. Now the computer didn't mix them up because it knows, in this case, the new motor is of type motorcycle, and the new vehicle is of type vehicle. So the computer is able to see, oh, since we're looking at this class, I'll use this toString. Or if I'm looking at this class, I'll use this toString. That's known as overriding. And in overriding, you have to have two separate classes, because if you had only one class and it had a method with the same parameters and the same method name, the computer wouldn't know which one to execute. So it would get confused and it would cause errors. So there has to be two separate classes for overriding. Now for overloading, if we look at this picture, overloading we have one class, but we have a method with the same name but different parameters. Now what's cool about this is that based off the parameters, the computer will know which method you want to use. So let me show you how to do that in a very simple program, and I call it public class subtract, because what we're going to do is create some methods where we subtract two numbers and then we return the value from that. But our methods are going to have the same name but different parameters. So let's start off with a public method. It's going to return an int, and we'll call it minus. So we can't call it subtract, minus. And within these parameters, I will include two int values. I'll do int x and int y. Now within here, the method is very simple. We're just subtracting two numbers. So what we will do, we'll create a new integer and we'll call it z. We'll set that equal to x minus y. And then we will return z. So like I said, very simple program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in our main method just to see if this method is working properly. And let's do let's do this. Let's just do a system.out.println. And what we'll do is we'll call that method the minus method. And we'll do minus. Let's do minus. It's x minus y, so I'll do 10. And then let's do 7. So all I'm doing is calling this method, and it should subtract these two numbers and then display the value that comes out of it. So I'm going to save it, compile it, and run it just to see if it's working properly. Do Java C subtract.java. Oh, and it looks like we have an error. Oh, so this is good. So non-static method minus int cannot be referenced from a static context. So this is an easy fix. So this method needs to be static because it's within the class. We just add that, and that should clear up our error. There we go. Now let's run the program and see if the method's working properly. And it looks like it is. So 10 minus 7 is 3. So that method is working properly. Now for overloading, it means that our class has multiple methods with the same method name, but different parameter types. So let's do a public static int minus, because it's the same name. But let's have 3 values within it. Let's do int x, int y, oops, int y, and int z right here. Awesome. Now let's create another int. We'll say int a is equal to x minus y minus z. Right? So you see here, our methods, they have the same name, right? They're both called minus, but they have different values within the parameters. So this one has 2 ints, while this has 3. So if you have 3 integers, that means you'll be subtracting 3 integers. So it'd be bad if the computer saw this minus and you had 3 integers here, and it got confused and used this method rather than this one, because you'd be missing out on a minus of one of these variables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put return a, and then I'm going to call the method down here as well. I'm going to do a system.out.println minus, and then I'm going to add 3 different integers within it. Let's do 20, let's do 10, and 2. Now the cool thing about this is that the computer is not going to mistake this minus method for this minus method because of what the parameters are within it, right? Because they do 2 different functions, they just have the same name, okay? I'm going to save it, compile it, run it just to show you everything's working properly. And you see here, our value is equal to 8. So 20 minus 10 is 10, minus 2 is 8. You see how it didn't mix up the 2 methods. This method was able to call this method based off of its parameters because it was expecting 3 integers. And then also this method wasn't confused because it was expecting 2 integers. Now just to show you that it would cause errors if you don't have the method properly written out. Let's do minus and then just include 1 integer, which is 2. I'm going to show you how this causes an error. So the computer looks back and is like, okay, which minus is it referencing to? And if it doesn't have a reference to a minus that has 1 integer value, then what can it do? It doesn't work. So let's compile it. And you see here, it says no suitable method found for minus int. It has a suitable method for 2 ints or 3 ints, but it doesn't have a suitable one for just 1 int. Now you can also do this for, let's say, double values. Let's make a overloaded method where we return double. Like I said, they all have the same method name, all within the same class, but the computer is never confused of what you are writing or what is going on. Let's do double x and double y. Now let's do a double z is equal to x minus y. Very simple program, return z. Okay, now let's hop back in here. Let's create some double variables. Let's say 20.5 and let's say 15.7, something like that. Now, if we were to add 2 or 3 double variables, it would be the same thing, where it does not find a suitable method for it because it's expecting 2 doubles. But I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to save it, compile, run it. Compile, run. And you can see here, got a really weird number. But if 25 was subtracted by 15.7, then the value would be 4.8. Not really sure where that 1 comes from, but yeah, you see how overloaded methods work, where it has the same parameter name, or the same method name, excuse me, which is minus, but it has different parameters within it. So this one has 2 integers, so if you call the minus method with 2 integers, it'll refer to this method. Then we have one with 3 integers. If we call the minus method with 3 integers, it'll refer to this method. And the same for double, we got 2 doubles. If we call our minus method with 2 doubles, it knows we're talking about this method right here. So the computer's never confused which is which. So that's overloading versus overriding, just to show you it again. Overriding requires you to have 2 different classes because you can't have one class with the same method name and the same parameters. But that's what overriding is when you have a method with the same method name and the same parameter within 2 different classes. And I like to think of it as the toString. toString is an overriding method because toString has the same method name and the same parameters throughout all the classes. But when you call that method, it's very specific to which class that it's looking at. So if it was looking at class dog and you called this bark method, it would say wolf. But if you had an object of class hound, that bark method would say this right here. And then overloading is a method that has the same method name but different parameters, and that's within the same class. And the computer doesn't get confused like I showed you. It doesn't get confused which method you're talking about because based off of its parameters, it's able to decipher which method that you're referring to. So that's overriding versus overloading. I would practice this. You'll get a lot of practice if you are working with classes and inheritance, especially. You'll do a lot of overriding. But other than that, I think that'll end today's video. I hope it helps. Everyone have a great day and happy coding.